A 50-kilogram bag of rice now costs 61,000 naira. Let that land for a second. 61,000 naira. That is what a family in Lagos is paying today in April 2026 just to put food on the table. And while Nigerians are scraping together what they can, the President of the Federal Republic stood in front of cameras this week not to address hunger, not to address insecurity, but to mock the opposition. He said, and I quote, "They want to scare me off? It's a lie. I've been through this path before." The ADC, the African Democratic Congress, fired back immediately. And what they said was not political noise, it was a direct message. Prepare to leave. So here's the question nobody is properly asking. Is this the final countdown to 2027, or is something bigger already in motion? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly where this is going. Before we go deeper, if you are just finding Naijanewsfeed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics, without the noise, without the spin, without the tribal agenda. If you want clarity, not confusion, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. It costs you nothing and it helps me keep doing this work. Now, let's get into it. Let's rewind to April 14, 2026, just 6 days ago. The African Democratic Congress, the ADC, held its national convention at the Rainbow Event Center in Abuja. Over 3,000 delegates attended from all 36 states. And the guest list, it read like a who's who of Nigerian opposition politics. Peter Obi was there, Atiku Abubakar was there, Rabiu Kwankwaso showed up. So did Rotimi Amaechi. Rauf Aregbesola, who actually serves as the party's new national secretary, was right there too. Now, why does this matter? Because the ADC was adopted in July 2025 as a unified opposition coalition platform, a deliberate attempt to bring the major opposition figures under one roof ahead of 2027. This was not a small local meeting. This was a declaration of intent. But here's where it gets interesting. 24 hours before the convention was even supposed to start, the ADC didn't have a venue. There were reports that pressure was being applied on the Rainbow Event Center to pull the license. Atiku himself released a statement accusing the government of attempting to sabotage the convention through abuse of power. The convention went ahead anyway. And then Tinubu responded. Speaking at the presidential villa while hosting what his office called Renewed Hope Ambassadors, the president dismissed the opposition gathering, reportedly mocked them for holding their convention on the street, and said he could not be intimidated. That comment set off a chain reaction. The ADC, through its National Publicity Secretary Bolaji Abdullahi, released a statement that essentially said, "Mr. President, you should be the one who is scared." And they listed the reasons. We're going to go through every single one of them. But there's a twist in the ADC's own story, something the party is not publicly talking about that could unravel this entire coalition before 2027. I'll come back to that. Now, let's talk about the structure, because without understanding the institutions involved, the politics won't fully make sense. The African Democratic Congress is a registered political party under Nigerian law, recognized by INEC. Political parties in Nigeria operate under the Electoral Act 2022 and the 1999 Constitution, which guarantees freedom of association and the right to form political parties. Here's the first institutional problem. The ADC is currently split into factions. There is a faction led by former Senate President David Mark, who presided over the April 14 convention. There is a rival faction led by Nafiu Bala Gombe. And there is a third group led by Ike Kachiku, who was vocal in his condemnation of the Mark-led convention. Now, INEC has responded to this internal dispute by suspending recognition of either faction pending a court ruling. And this is the critical point. Without INEC formally recognizing a unified ADC leadership, the party legally cannot conduct primaries or present candidates for the 2027 elections. The courts are now the battlefield. The Court of Appeal has already directed the Federal Court to quickly determine who the authentic ADC chairman is. A Federal High Court also issued an order on the very day of the convention, April 14, directing all parties to maintain the status quo pending resolution. Kachiku's faction says that means the convention itself was illegal. And here's the gray area being exploited. The Nigerian constitution guarantees democratic participation, but it also requires political parties to have clear, lawfully recognized leadership structures before contesting elections. If the ADC's leadership question isn't resolved by the time INEC sets the primary timetable for 2027, the entire coalition collapses before it even gets to a ballot. So the institutional clock is already ticking, and the RPC knows it. Who benefits and how? Let's be direct. The APC and the Tinubu administration benefit from three things right now. First, a fractured opposition. As long as the ADC remains split across three factions and tied up in court battles, the coalition threat to 2027 is theoretical, not real. A divided opposition has historically handed incumbents easy victories in Nigerian politics. Second, controlling the narrative. By publicly mocking the ADC convention, Tinubu forced the ADC to respond defensively, which shifts the conversation away from governance failures and toward political drama. Third, the INEC dimension. Atiku Abubakar publicly accused INEC of being used to undermine democracy. INEC's suspension of ADC recognition, timed around the convention, adds fuel to those accusations. Whether or not the accusation is true, it allows the opposition to build a persecution narrative that energizes their base. Who stands to lose? The most exposed figure right now is actually the coalition itself. Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar are both in the ADC and both want the presidential ticket. There is no agreement between them. The ADC's own spokesperson, Bolaji Abdullahi, described the Atiku-Obi dynamic as a conundrum and a challenge the party is concerned about. That's the party's own spokesman, saying they don't know how to resolve who goes at the top. Atiku has been blunt about it. "This will be my last shot," he said on Arise TV. And he added, "No one is stepping down." Peter Obi hasn't budged either. He's committed to the party, light on specifics, but his supporters are immovable. They will not accept him being demoted to a running mate slot. So you have two men, one party, one ticket, and zero agreement. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The ADC's biggest threat in 2027 is not Tinubu, it's themselves. The silent players. Watch two names that aren't making the headlines. Nasir El-Rufai, the former Kaduna governor, and former Attorney General Abubakar Malami, who attended the convention in a show of support. These are men with serious network depth in the north. Their involvement signals that this coalition has structural support beyond the celebrity politicians at the front. David Mark, as ADC national chairman, is also a strategic choice. He's a former Senate president. He knows the corridors of power in Abuja better than most. His presence gives the party institutional credibility, even as the courts challenge his legitimacy. The Tinubu-Buhari move. One of the most politically revealing moments in the ADC statement was this. They called out Tinubu for suddenly making a U-turn towards supporters of former President Buhari, after years of reportedly distancing himself from Buhari's record. Think about what that means. With 2027 approaching, Tinubu is trying to consolidate northern support that was attached to the Buhari brand. But the ADC says, and this is their political calculation, that move is too late and too transparent to work. The electoral math in Nigeria is simple. No president wins without strong northern voter turnout. That's the battleground, and both the APC and the ADC know it. Now, if what I just laid out surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know your take before we get to the part that changes the whole picture. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Naijanewsfeed is completely free. Your subscription is the only way you can support this channel and help me keep breaking down Nigerian politics at this level.
Hit subscribe, it takes 2 seconds, and it means everything. Let's talk about what all of this means for ordinary Nigerians, because that's ultimately the point. The ADC statement listed 6 specific grievances. These aren't just political talking points. Let's measure them against what the data actually says. 1. The cost of living crisis. In March 2026, Nigeria's inflation rate climbed back up to 15.38%, reversing 11 months of steady decline. Food inflation hit 14.31%. A bag of rice is now 61,000 naira. A kilogram of frozen chicken costs 6,000 naira. Gari, a pint bucket of it is now almost 2,000 naira. These aren't government figures being disputed. They're confirmed by the National Bureau of Statistics and independently verified by market reporters on the ground. 2. Purchasing power is collapsing. Market traders in Lagos told reporters this Easter was the hardest in years. One consumer said, and I'm paraphrasing, "We couldn't even afford a whole chicken. We celebrated quietly and hoped things would improve." 3. Insecurity reaching new depths. At the ADC convention, Rotimi Amaechi described watching footage of people in Nasarawa fleeing their communities and compared it to a civil war. And the ADC statement made a jarring point. Even while Tinubu was speaking at the villa, reports were circulating of children being abducted from examination centers. These are not abstract security statistics. These are children sitting exams being taken. 4. Budget implementation failure. In March 2026, the ADC released a separate statement accusing the Tinubu administration of running 3 national budgets simultaneously, 2024, 2025, and 2026, without fully implementing any of them. Capital spending in key sectors, power, education, communications, health, remains critically underfunded. The only ministry that has exceeded its allocation is defense, driven largely by emergency security funding. Yet, insecurity continues. The government's own data shows foreign reserves above $42 billion and improved revenue. So the question Nigerians are asking is, where is the money going? If reserves are up and revenue is up, why is rice at 61,000 naira? The international angle here is significant and it's being underreported. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, issued a warning just this week during its spring meetings in Washington, D.C. The fund's African Department Director, Abebe Selassie, said Nigerians could face more difficult economic conditions in the coming months. He specifically flagged transportation costs and food prices as the 2 immediate pressure points. The IMF also revised Nigeria's 2026 growth forecast down by 0.3 percentage points, cutting it from 4.4% to 4.1%, citing mounting global and domestic pressures. Now, here's the layered context. The Middle East crisis has pushed global oil prices higher. Nigeria, as an oil producer, should theoretically benefit. But because Nigeria removed its fuel subsidy and still imports refined petroleum products, higher global oil prices are actually passing through to domestic pump prices, which inflates transportation costs, which inflates food prices. The government's reform strategy is caught in a contradiction it hasn't resolved. The World Bank has weighed in. Its senior economist for Nigeria, Samamata, put it plainly, food inflation is the biggest tax on the poor. The World Bank acknowledged economic growth. Nigeria's economy did expand, but warned that growth without relief for food costs means nothing to the average household. For Nigerians in the diaspora watching this, what you are seeing is not just domestic politics. Your remittances home are buying less. Your families are navigating a cost of living crisis that international institutions are now flagging as a serious risk. The political noise around the ADC and Tinubu is the surface layer. The economic pressure underneath it is what drives political change.
Let me be honest with you, because that's the whole point of this channel. The strongest argument from the government side goes like this. Nigeria's economic challenges were inherited. The fuel subsidy removal, which caused immediate price pain, was a necessary structural correction that previous governments were too afraid to make. Inflation, while still high, has been declining for 11 consecutive months before March's slight uptick. Foreign reserves are at their strongest in years. The economy is growing. Give it time. That argument is not without merit. the macro numbers do show improvement in some indicators, and it is factually true that Nigeria's subsidy bill was unsustainable. But here's where it falls apart at the human level. Structural reforms and macroeconomic metrics mean nothing to a mother in Kano who cannot afford Gari. The question is not whether Nigeria's economy is improving on paper, the question is whether Nigerians can feel it. And the answer, from market flaws to household budgets, is clearly no. Now, let me address two specific misconceptions. Misconception 1. The ADC is just a collection of angry losers from 2023. That framing is convenient but wrong. The ADC convention was not a gathering of bitter politicians with nothing to offer. It pulled together structural networks across the north, the southeast, the southwest, and the south-south. Kwankwaso brings Kano, Atiku brings the PDP north, Obi brings the urban south and youth voter base, Amaechi brings the rivers political structure. That is a real coalition. Fragile, yes, but structurally real. Misconception 2. This is just noise before 2027. Nothing will change. Nigerian political history tells a different story. In 2015, an opposition coalition that many dismissed as noise removed a sitting president for the first time in Nigeria's democratic history. Institutional conditions today, economic hardship, youth unemployment, insecurity, are arguably more severe. Dismissing the opposition's potential is a mistake. Remember, at the start I said there was a twist the ADC isn't publicly talking about. Here it is. The Supreme Court has not yet ruled on the leadership dispute. INEC has suspended recognition of all ADC factions. If the court ruling goes against the MARC-led faction, which includes Atiku, Obi, and Amaechi, the April 14th convention could be legally voided. That means no recognized leadership, no primaries, no candidates. The ADC's ability to contest 2027 depends entirely on resolving this legal question, and the timeline is extremely tight. INEC's 2027 election timetable will require parties to complete primaries well over a year before election day. That clock is running. Most likely next moves. From the APC, expect continued efforts to keep the ADC's legal and leadership crisis in the courts for as long as possible. Every month of uncertainty is a month the opposition cannot build campaign infrastructure. From the ADC, expect an aggressive push for a Supreme Court ruling in their favor, combined with attempts to publicly frame INEC's actions as government interference, which energizes their base even while the legal process plays out. From Atiku and Obi individually, watch for back-channel negotiations on the presidential ticket. Dele Momodu, an ADC chieftain himself, warned in March that time is not on our side. That warning carries weight. If ticket negotiations don't move forward by mid-2026, the coalition arithmetic begins to break down. Signals to watch. The Supreme Court ruling on ADC leadership, this is the single most critical event to watch. Whether INEC restores recognition to one ADC faction before party primaries begin, any public joint appearance or statement by Atiku and Obi announcing a shared ticket, that would be the clearest signal the coalition is real. Government economic announcements timed to reduce public anger before 2027 campaigning begins. Security incidents. If security worsens significantly, it becomes harder for any incumbent to win re-election. Best case versus worst case. Best case for Nigeria, the ADC resolves its legal crisis, agrees on a joint ticket, runs a credible campaign, and forces the 2027 election into a genuine contest of ideas, which improves both governance accountability and democratic culture regardless of who wins. Worst case, the ADC stays fractured, the legal battle drags through 2026, the coalition collapses, and Tinubu faces a divided opposition that hands him a comfortable second-term victory, with no meaningful check on policy direction. The real question isn't whether Tinubu can win in 2027, the real question is whether the opposition can hold itself from fighting itself long enough to make it a fair fight. Let's return to where we started. A president who stood before the cameras this week and said he could not be intimidated. An opposition that fired back with a simple message: you should be scared, not of us, but of the millions of Nigerians who can no longer afford to eat. The ADC's warning is not just political noise, it is backed by real economic pain. A bag of rice at 61,000 naira, food inflation climbing again, the IMF issuing warnings, children being taken from examination centers, 3 budgets running at the same time with none fully implemented. And on the other side, a coalition with star power, structural depth, and serious intent, but also with internal legal battles, an unresolved ticket question, and a race against an INEC timetable that waits for no one. Here is my measured conclusion. The ADC's prepare to leave message is credible enough to be taken seriously, but only if the coalition can get out of its own way. The threat to Tinubu's second term is real, but so is the threat that the opposition dismantles itself before it gets to the ballot. 2027 is not decided yet, but the moves happening right now in courtrooms, at INEC, behind closed doors between Atiku and Obi's camps, those are the moves that will decide it. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the ADC can hold this coalition together? Do you think Tinubu can survive the economic pressure? Drop your take in the comments. I read every single one. If this breakdown gave you clarity on what's really going on in Nigeria, do me one favor. Share this video with one person who needs to understand this. Not 2 people, just one. That single share is how this channel grows, and it is literally the only way you can help me keep producing content at this level. Like the video, subscribe to Najanewsfeed, and turn on your notifications so you never miss the next breakdown. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.